There is something going on with Jehovah's Witnesses right now in Norway. It's getting bad for the organization. Now, this is a little bit of a story, so let me just start from the beginning. I won't bury the lead. Let me just tell you, Jehovah's Witnesses have lost their status as a religion in Norway, and there are a lot of implications that come along with that are good for people who are opposed to Jehovah's Witnesses as an organization and what they do to their members. This is an article by Hemant Mehta. It was written on January 31st, 2022. It's on Only Sky. Let me just kind of give a recap of what happened a couple months ago with Jehovah's Witnesses, and then we're going to talk about a verdict that came down very recently. My channel, as some people can probably tell, views are suffering, so I would appreciate it if you watch a video, watch from beginning to end. Don't turn it off in the middle. That is one of the factors that YouTube uses to determine how far a video is going to go, or if it's going to fall and die, basically. If regular viewers watch the entire thing, it gets a massive boost. So if you guys watch one of my videos, try to watch it from beginning to end. I would appreciate it. So let's read this article real quick, give you a little bit of context for what's happening. In a move that's both long overdue and shocking, the Norwegian government said it would no longer provide funding to the Jehovah's Witnesses because of the religious sect's cult-like practices. Now remember, this is back in January, late January 2023. So this article is just a little bit old, but this is what happened back then, and this context is necessary for understanding the rest. Norway, which has a national church but no longer has a national religion, whatever that means, is one of those countries where religion is literally supported by taxpayers. The more members you have, the more money your preferred religious or humanist organization receives. That's really stupid, seems to me. Any religious group with 50 registered members are allowed to apply for state subsidies, and more than 800 groups receive that kind of funding. That's a terrible idea. How did this get started in Norway? That's awful. The law is very open regarding the kind of religious or non-religious groups that can receive that money. However, there are some lines in the sand. Here's a quote. If a religious or philosophical community or individuals acting on behalf of the community commits violence or coercion, makes threats, violates children's rights, violates statutory discrimination prohibitions, or in other ways seriously violates the rights and freedoms of others, society may be denied grants, or grants may be suspended. So that's the important part of the quote. And here's the crux of the argument, if you will. Jehovah's Witnesses definitely use coercive methods to retain their membership. Now, when that membership determines the amount of money, the amount of grants and subsidies that you get from the government, it's obvious coercion would be forbidden, right? It seems to me. Like, of course they're going to forbid coercion. Unfortunately for Jehovah's Witnesses, that's what they're all about. They coerce. They aren't allowed to send people to jail for breaking a rule, like smoking a cigarette. They're not allowed to send people to jail for thinking about a woman when you're not married to her. That's a rule. I'm dead serious. They're not allowed to send people to jail for using a King James Bible and refusing to use the Jehovah's Witness translation. These are all rules that are broken within Jehovah's Witnesses religion, but they can't send anybody to jail for that. So what do they do instead? They send you to a mental prison. They prevent you from talking to your friends and family for the rest of your life until the day they die. This is real. And that's a clear form of coercion. Clear as day, right? As a matter of fact, Jehovah's Witnesses are banned in Russia for a very similar reason. Now, they haven't been banned in Norway. They're allowed to operate. They're just not allowed to get state money now. But in Russia, they are outright banned, which, for the record, I disagree with. They're banned from meeting, basically, in Russia. And the reasoning in Russia is they're an extremist organization who coerces people and separates their members from the outside world. I mean, all of that is correct. I just don't think it's a good reason to ban them outright. I think they should find another way to deal with the Jehovah's Witness problem, and this one isn't too bad. So anyways, let's keep reading here. That makes sense. A group that endorses violence shouldn't get taxpayer money, nor should any group hurting children or violating human rights. Sure, there are atheists who might argue that any form of religious indoctrination is child abuse, but these rules are theoretically limited to things that are irrefutable and not up for debate. More specifically, groups that receive those subsidies can't force people to remain members. They can't ban interactions with non-members. They can't make children pledge a lifelong commitment to them. If they cross those boundaries, then their groups might lose the government funding. And that is the bottom line. So they went through the court system, and we have a verdict as of this morning. As of the moment that I'm reading this to you, we've got a verdict. Like, Jehovah's Witnesses went through and appealed the decision to remove their status as a religion, and they lost the appeal. Okay, so let's read this. This is on the XJW subreddit. This is a summary/status regarding Norway, written by Frode Commode, apparently. Metal name, by the by. All right, let's take a look. Number 1, Norway funds all religions, but there are terms that need to be met. Number 2, after years of battling Watchtower with letters and articles, the state has concluded that Jehovah's Witnesses break those terms. Fantastic decision. They're absolutely correct on this. Funding for 2021 was denied, and if no new information appears or policy change, this will be a permanent decision for all years to come. All Watchtower appeals in the governmental system have been considered and denied. This is the end of the road for Jehovah's Witnesses in Norway. They are allowed to do whatever they want. They can continue to practice their religion and worship and believe and blah, 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 whatever. But they don't get the protections that they receive as a religion. And they also don't get the grants and subsidies, the money that come from being a religion in Norway. So that's good. This is fantastic news. This is exactly what I want. In fact, I'd like to take it one step further, just a little bit further. I don't want to ban them. I want them to be allowed to operate within the religion. But I don't want them receiving subsidies. In fact, I'll tell you what I would like. I want the state to fine them for every day that they don't remove an ass-backwards policy, like shunning people. I want the state to fine them every single day that they refuse to. And of course they're going to refuse to. So they're just going to have to pay fines for the rest of their time in Norway or exit the country, which isn't going to happen. That's the road I would like to see, ideally. Anyway, let's keep reading here. Number 4, when they now are removed from the funding system, their name on the list of funded religions will be removed. This is what we call registration. It's not a list of allowed religions in Norway, but a list of funded religions. They're still free to worship, preach, and gather as always. No difference. Their current registration for 2022 would not be renewed for 2023. That's fantastic news. I love it. Number 5, connected to the list of funded religions are the matrimonial privilege. When they're removed, this privilege disappears. They can still have the Kingdom Hall ceremony, as always, for those approved, aka those lying about funding, etc. But to make the marriage legal, the couple will have to sign the papers in the courthouse/city hall instead of inside the Kingdom Hall. Oh, I love it, dude. So they're not allowed to legally marry anybody anymore. That's fantastic. Yeah, honestly, that shouldn't be tied to religion anyways. Yeah, I mean, I don't know why religions handle marriages anyways. It shouldn't be like an aspect of religion, but okay. If they're smart, they will sign the papers some days ahead and get started. That would be unacceptable to Jehovah's Witnesses. They take this seriously, like real seriously. You're not allowed to do anything or even be alone with this person before marriage. If you're in a situation which could have led to you committing fornication or something, like if somebody sees you and another person walk into a room alone, then you've effectively committed fornication in the eyes of Jehovah's Witnesses. They take it really seriously. So you may be legally married, but scripturally, I don't think that would fly. Jehovah's Witnesses wouldn't accept that. You'd have to have your ceremony. Here's number 6. Watchtower sued the Norwegian government in court to get the funding back. Their counterpart will be the Ministry of Children and Family, as religion is part of their ministry. Watchtower's claim is that this decision is a breach of freedom of religion and human rights. The lawsuit was filed on December 21st, 2022. Well, that's interesting. They feel like this is a breach of freedom of religion. I mean, and human rights. They're perfectly free to practice their religion. There's no violation here. They're just not allowed to take funding from the government. Is the problem. Now, I guess I could see them arguing that not being allowed to officiate weddings is a violation of their religious belief, but there's a problem here. So there's this concept that I talk about. Here's how it goes. Your right to swing your fist ends at the tip of my nose. You can swing your fist anywhere you want, except for right here. When you swing it here, you're not exercising your rights to swing your fist. Now you are violating my right to not have my face punched. See how that works? That's the concept that's used when determining if somebody's rights are being violated. Let me give you another example. You're in your house, you're in an apartment building, right? And you're sitting there and you start to smell cigarette smoke. You smell it all over the place. It's in the walls, it's seeping into the curtains. You can't get away from it. Your neighbor smokes cigarettes next to the door every day. They're in their apartment, but they're swinging their fist effectively, and they're hitting your nose, literally. Well, not literally, I guess. Figuratively, hitting your nose, I suppose. In this concept, based on how human rights generally are viewed in society, the person would have to find a new place to smoke their cigarettes. Maybe, away from the door or on their balcony or something like that. Because your rights are being violated to live in your home peacefully, to your right to peace and security in your own home. That's not in the Constitution, but that's in the Declaration of Human Rights by the UN. That's generally how the concept works. So Jehovah's Witnesses claim that their freedom of religion is being violated to officiate weddings, for example. But they're actually violating human rights by coercing them to be a member of this organization. Articles 18 and 22, I believe, of the Declaration of Human Rights pertain to this. This is on the UN website. Let's just check Article 18. Everyone has the right to freedom of thought, conscience, and religion. That right includes freedom to change his religion or belief, and freedom, either alone or in community with others, and in public or private, to manifest his religion or belief in teaching, practice, worship, and observance. Jehovah's Witnesses are violating people's freedom to change their religion. It's Article 20, not Article 22. Everyone has the right to freedom of peaceful assembly and association, and no one may be compelled to belong to an association. Jehovah's Witnesses are effectively compelling people to belong to an association by shunning people if they leave the religion, and that's the hang-up here. Jehovah's Witnesses are swinging their fist around by practicing their religion and hitting people like me in the nose by ordering their members to shun me. People that I knew my entire life, grew up with, people who saw me when I was a tiny little tyke. I mean, people who gave my parents support and money when they were broke and didn't have enough to buy a backpack for me to go to school. These people purchased a backpack for me. They saw me from age 8 to age 18. They lived in my community. They contributed, they helped, they guided me morally and ethically and everything else. And Jehovah's Witnesses, as a religion, ordered these people to, when they see me in public, look me in the eyes and then look away. Pretend I'm a ghost for the rest of my life until the day that I die. Not allowed to talk to me ever again. Unless I rejoin their organization. Now, to me, that sounds like compelling somebody to belong to an association. That's just me. That's what it sounds like. So anyways, they're definitely violating people's rights. They're swinging their fist around. As long as nobody is in the way of their fist, that's okay. But if somebody comes into range of their fist, they have to stop. Right? That's how this works. So they've lost their right to government funding in Norway, rightfully so. Unfortunately, this only applies to Norway, nowhere else. It should definitely apply to the U.S. and Canada and every other country. So here's number 7. As part of the lawsuit, Watchtower on December 22nd, 2022, asked the court for a temporary injunction that would protect JWs from any changes when the current registration runs out in 2022, a few days after the demand was filed. Courts took holidays as everybody else. Okay. This injunction was approved in a rush on December 30th, 2022. This was done after a one-sided demand from Watchtower. The state had no word in it as it had no time to prepare an answer or argue against it because it was during a holiday season. Of course. That's the kind of thing Jehovah's Witnesses do. The judge said that there is not much at stake. No harm will be done if this is approved for a short time until courts decide otherwise. The state has said they will argue against this when the government attorney has had time to prepare their counter-argument. This can happen at any time. As this is a civil lawsuit, most of the legal arguments will be done in written arguments ahead of court day before the judge that will consider the case. Right, probably in what's called amicus briefs. They're basically legal arguments that you write and then send to the judge for the judge to consider. I don't know how the Norway legal system works, but that's how the U.S. system works. So the result of this is that until further notice, Jehovah's Witnesses keep their matrimonial privilege. According to the funding, this means nothing, as funding gets paid out once a year and was already denied for 2021. Fantastic news. I love it to death. That's great. Watchtower plays pretend and lets the whole world know that the attempt to remove the registration of Jehovah's Witnesses in Norway has been suspended. Praise be. Of course, this came and went, and it was lifted. That suspension was lifted, so. The real court case has not even begun. First, we will have a period with written arguments from both sides, and normally there's negotiations. It will be an attempt to reach an understanding on common ground. Watchtower will never accept this, so at some point, a court date will be set. I'll make sure to attend this day in court if possible and let you know. This is straight from the Reddit writer, by the by. The Reddit person that wrote this post is saying this. When the court reaches its conclusion, the decision will be appealed. There's just no way either Watchtower or the state will accept a loss here, as this is the first test on the new law from 2021 in Norway. There's no way the state will allow one single judge in the lowest court to say that the Norwegian government and the Norwegian parliament has made a law that breaches human rights and freedom of religion. And Watchtower are stubborn, as always. They want their money and will spend a lot of money trying to get it back. Yeah, this is really just about money. That's kind of disgusting, isn't it? They are effectively taking advantage of the court system in an attempt to receive government funding for nothing. That's just disgusting. That's just disgusting behavior, seems to me. And they're pretending to be, persecuted because they're not being given money. Next level of courts. We're now in 2024, and this will appear Lagmannsretten, I think. After the decision is made, you can read number 12 again, which is the one right before this. Now the decision will be appealed in the Norwegian Supreme Court. They will have two choices: either just refuse the appeal because they feel the decision in courts below is right, or accept a full hearing in the Supreme Court, I assume is what this is. Since this will be an important principle regarding the new law, there's a good chance for the Supreme Court to take this up. We're now in 2025 or late 2024. When the Supreme Court reaches a conclusion in 2025, two things can happen. Watchtower wins. That won't mean that they get their money, but that Norway will have to reconsider the wording in the law or the decision. The state will have to decide, or Watchtower loses. Watchtower will then sue the Norwegian state in the EHCR in Strasbourg. Wow. They're going to take it all the way, aren't they? They're going to do everything they can. They're going to exhaust every single appeal. This is crazy. If they accept, this will be an EHCR case. The Watchtower versus Norway, where Watchtower will have to argue that the funding is a basic need for their human rights in Norway. Okay, apparently the EHCR is the European Convention on Human Rights. It's like an overarching governing body within Europe, all of Europe, that they can use to appeal any decision for any state within Europe. You don't like a human rights decision made in France, you go to the EHCR to appeal it. And apparently the EHCR can override France's decisions, I'm assuming. Interesting. I didn't know that existed. EHCR can't just overrule Norway and overrule the decision, but they can send the case back for new consideration in Norway. If that happens, there are several ways ahead. Norway can change a few words in the law, some words in the decision, and then go back to number 3 again. Number 3 being, basically funding was denied. We're starting from scratch. Or they can split the funding and registration into separate laws, deny funding, but let them keep the registration matrimonial privileges. Time will tell. If they receive their matrimonial, like their marriage certificate thing back, if they're allowed to marry people again, there's no excuse that they could use to say their human rights are being violated to any degree, no matter what. You're not entitled to receiving money from the state for being a religion. That's just ridiculous. So, yeah, if they get their marriage privileges back, they'll have absolutely no complaint whatsoever. We're now probably in 2027 or something, and I'm sick of all this mess I started, lol. Move on, happily ever after. So I probably de-gaff anymore anyways, right? So basically, Jehovah's Witnesses have some paths open still, but it sounds like within Norway, their path is pretty much closed. They're going to have to go to the EHCR moving forward. And like I said, I think that there are still some legal avenues maybe that they can take, like taking it to the Supreme Court of Norway or whatever. But by and large, I think Jehovah's Witnesses have hit kind of a brick wall with this decision, and that's fantastic news. Jehovah's Witnesses have lost funding in Norway. I don't see any way around it, and I'm just really glad to hear that. I'm glad to hear, honestly, I don't care about the funding as much. I'm glad to hear that other countries are beginning to recognize that Jehovah's Witnesses are an abusive, coercive organization. That's what I'm glad to hear. Let's just take a look at a couple of comments on Reddit here. They need to rely on Jehovah more. That's what I was told when I said I couldn't regular pioneer. That's funny. I also commonly hear that this is what you need to do when you have a concern about CSA, child mistreatment, in the organization. Evidently, the organization is not following its own advice. That's funny. How much of the begged for donations that they don't solicit for, according to Jehovah's Witnesses, will be wasted in a fight over $1.6 million a year? Apparently, that's all they get. I thought it was going to be more, which is in reality a drop in the bucket for a multi-billion-dollar publishing and real estate company. All this boils down to is an opportunity to have another religious oppression story that will make the Watchtower monthly and create nice persecution stories for the governing body to not solicit, quote-unquote, more funds with. It's a created issue by the Borg that will be exploited for years to come. I completely agree with that assessment. Yeah, 100%. Yeah, if you notice, they mentioned Jehovah's Witnesses are basically a publishing and real estate company, right? Watchtower Bible and Tract Society started out as a publishing company, like book publishing, and they only ever published their own literature, which was paid for by the members. Eventually, they got into real estate, so Jehovah's Witnesses would, as an organization, get their members to do what's called a quick build up a Kingdom Hall in a weekend. Start out with the lumber that arrives on site on a Friday, and on Monday you're putting the wallpaper up. Seriously, I've taken part in these. So anyways, they do a quick build and, keep the people in the Kingdom Halls for a little while, 10 years maybe. They build a new one and then sell off the old one. The real cost to building something, like building a church or whatever, is the cost of labor. The materials are practically nothing. If you know what you're doing, you can build a $300,000 house for $30,000 if you're doing all of the work over the course of time. The materials are not, they're just a fraction of the costs of building something. It's paying employees, construction workers, to stand there and build it. So if Jehovah's Witnesses are getting free labor from their people, they're pocketing that difference, basically. They build a gigantic, beautiful Kingdom Hall worth, hell, even up to $500,000 in some cases. In nice areas, sometimes the land is even donated to them. And they have their members build everything up, and boom, they suddenly own a $500,000 property, which they can then use as leverage to get loans and stuff like that. So that's how that works. That's how Watchtower Bible and Tract Society generates money. It's not so much through donations, because their members are broke as shit. When you get governing body members like Tony Morris, not anymore, he got kicked out of the governing body, but when you get governing body members saying things like Tony Morris said about higher education, naturally, members are not going to have much to donate.
Sometimes people will say, well, Jehovah's Witnesses are against education. Well, that's ridiculous. We're not against education. We are pro-education. It's just that we are selective with who does the educating.
That's such a cop-out answer. They're obviously opposed to higher education. They just want people to go to their kingdom halls. Just say that. No, I don't want people going to college. I want them coming to the kingdom halls. This is how propaganda is formed out, by the by.
We promote divine education. We believe it to be superior because it leads to everlasting life.
I mean, you can have both. Why not both? Why not send your members to college and also to the kingdom hall? Because they believe higher education is bad. And he's defending that position right now, but he's about to shut his own argument down. Listen to this.
So, with schools of higher education, in many of their curriculums, and if you know anything about it, maybe some of you have been, do they not have Philosophy 1 and Philosophy 2? It doesn't matter what you're going to major in. And they start you off there. You'd be going for another thing, but you have Philosophy 1, you have Philosophy 2.
I never had those, and I went to college. I guess it depends.
And then all of a sudden it gets in there, and the intellectual gripping of the mind, very hard to recover from.
The intellectual gripping of the mind, hard to recover from. So anyways, when you get governing body members saying things like that, it becomes obvious that they wouldn't have much money to donate to the organization, and they have to rely heavily on their quick builds and their real estate wing, basically, of the organization. Somebody says, how could that ever possibly be up to code? Oh, yeah, I mean, Jehovah's Witnesses, if they're good at anything, it's building. Thing is, you just heard they are discouraged from going to college. But trade schools are fine. Apprenticeship programs are fine. When I was younger, I actually trained with a guy. I was an apprentice plumber. This guy was a journeyman, I believe, and he was teaching me to be an apprentice plumber. And I went on all kinds of jobs with him, and he made fat stacks doing plumbing. So Jehovah's Witnesses will get into the trades heavily. They'll do electrical, they'll do plumbing. Window washing is not a trade, but a very popular occupation among Jehovah's Witnesses. And they basically, one guy owns the company in the Kingdom Hall, and every member of the Kingdom Hall works for him, just about. That's usually how it works. So, anyways, yeah, interesting stuff. I'm glad to hear Jehovah's Witnesses have had their status removed, and the outside world seems to be recognizing it for what it is. Deeply destructive to society. Fantastic news.